It is now January, the leading month for heart attacks for NFL fans. And I'm not just joking when I say that. January is literally the leading month for heart attacks in North America. It's the time of year where we Americans show our true colors, showing nothing but unwavering loyalty and support for the teams we love, and when those teams don't deliver, we revolt, freak out, damn near riot, like crazy husbands and wives that feel like the love isn't being reciprocated. All fan bases but one will be reliving this roller coaster of emotions as we dive into the NFL playoffs. My final record for the regular season was 164 right and 107 wrong, and quite honestly, I don't care anymore. I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna enjoy this NFL postseason. No, I'm not, because I'm gonna be predicting these playoff games as well. And I must apologize for last week. I wasn't aware that the site of the Buccaneers-Panthers game would be played in Tampa Bay. I got that wrong. And I also wasn't aware that Justin Herbert wouldn't be playing against the Broncos. See guys, I mess up. I'm not perfect. So for this video, I really locked in and gathered as much necessary information as I could for these postseason games. And now a quick moment of silence, please, for the teams that came up just short of the postseason. Now with the introductions out of the way, let's get into the matchups of the teams that were worthy enough or lucky enough to make the elimination games. On Saturday, the LA Rams will be playing the Panthers in Carolina. Last week, the Rams played the Cardinals, to which they looked pretty diluted up until the back half of the game. Meanwhile, the Panthers looked diluted for the majority of their game against the Buccaneers, continuing to be allergic to converting on third downs. The Panthers did lose their game to the Buccaneers, dropping their last two. They did not earn their spot in the playoffs. They won because the Falcons beat the Saints, but the Panthers did not punch their own ticket to the postseason. They do not deserve to be here. Now let's get into the overall season statistics for both teams. The Rams are sitting comfortably as the #1 offense in the NFL, mostly thanks to Matthew Stafford in that elite passing game, though their run game can be quite deadly. As for their defense, it's nothing exceptional, but it's adequate enough. Their defense can be pretty solid at times. As for the Panthers, there's not a whole lot of good to say about them. They are lacking in most of the major NFL statistics, finding themselves in the back half of most of them. And again, on top of the fact that they lost their last two games at home. The only upper hand that the Panthers really have in this matchup is the fact that they actually beat the Rams a few weeks ago in Carolina. But you can make an argument that that was just a pretty poor game for the Rams. They just had a bad day, which they are not usually accustomed to having in the playoffs. The Rams are usually a very consistent and thorough team on both sides of the ball in the postseason. So when it comes to bringing them down in the playoffs, it usually takes a legitimately better team to beat LA, which the Panthers clearly are not. So with that said, I'm going to have to pick the Rams to win this game here. They outdo the Panthers in pretty much every major category in football. So unless LA has another bad game, which again, they don't really do in the playoffs, this should be a very easy win for the Rams. Next up, the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. Both teams had pretty pitiful games last week, only scoring 16 and 3 points against their already eliminated division rivals. So yeah, very icky way to come into the playoffs, especially for Green Bay, who's now on a 4-game losing streak. These guys have played each other twice already, both getting a win off in very tight matchups, the most recent matchup being a few weeks ago, with the Bears taking advantage of a major Packers collapse and pulling out a clutch win in overtime in this very stadium that they will be playing in. Green Bay has not recovered from that free fall since. Statistics showed that the Bears are completely blowing the league out of the water when it comes to turnover differential with a +22. However, that doesn't mean their defense is good. Their defense is actually pretty piss poor. But they are able to counteract that lackluster defense with their top 10 offense and top 3 rush offense. Rush offense being something that the Packers have not been good at patching up lately. Green Bay has definitely been susceptible to the ground game. They just have struggled to stop it. They struggled to stop it against the Bears. They absolutely struggled against Derrick Henry a couple weeks ago. However, the Packers do have the much better playoff experience, considering the Bears haven't made the postseason since 2018. And I do think that actually plays a part in these playoff games experience. Playoff atmosphere is simply just different from a normal football game. It puts extra pressure on the players mentally, and it really tends to affect their performance. So yes, I do think when it comes to a newer playoff team versus a playoff team that's, been going to the postseason for a while, I do think that that is a slight advantage for the veteran team. But with that said, this is a game that could still be determined by a coin flip. This shit could go either way, literally. But my answer is going to be the Bears. I feel a little bit more comfortable with them winning this because the Packers, like I said, they've just been in free fall mode. They're on a losing streak. They just haven't looked good in quite some time, and they're going through a couple of injuries and roster switch ups that's really gonna keep rocking the team's ship. And if Chicago is able to expose the Packers' poor run defense, then it's going to be extremely difficult for the Packers to keep up. So I'm going to settle with Chicago to win this one. Next up, you got an intriguing matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the Jaguars. Both teams were unfortunate enough to be given the one morning playoff game this postseason, so that sucks for them. But they both did come off of some rather clean wins last week in Week 18, though it was against some pretty piss-poor division rivals. It's still good to see them both not slipping up. The Bills finish off the season with a top 5 overall offense and a pretty underrated pass defense, which is number 1 in the league. The Bills also have the number 1 rushing offense, which is funny because their weakness is when their opponent runs the ball a lot, as they sit at 28th in run defense. And I personally just cannot let go of that game a couple weeks ago against the Eagles, where particularly their offense was lacking, and it's just real concerning to see that against another playoff team, because what am I supposed to expect of the Bills now that they are here in the playoffs? Especially now that they're taking on the Jaguars, who will challenge the Bills' run game with their own number 1 run defense. No team in the league has been better at stopping the run than Jacksonville this year. On top of that, the Jaguars have a pretty solid turnover differential of plus 13. But other than that, Jacksonville is pretty middle ground in most of the other major statistics. And the Bills have much more playoff experience than the Jaguars, which, like I said, I think plays at least a slight role in these matchups. But I can't ignore that the Jaguars are riding into this game on an 8-game win streak, including a big win over the once red-hot Denver Broncos. I'm not gonna lie, I feel good picking the Jaguars here to win this. They're hot, they're hungry, they know what they're doing, and just most of all, they've been consistent, whereas the Bills have not recently. I of course wouldn't be surprised if Buffalo won this game, but I see Jacksonville taking this one. I feel like they have proved that they are a worthy threat, capable of bringing down some of the best teams in the league right now. Next, you got the 49ers taking on the Philly Cheesesteaks. I bet the 49ers won't be wearing black jerseys very many more times after that last game against the Seahawks, where they played one of their worst games under Kyle Shanahan, scoring no touchdowns, and for the most part just getting owned by Seattle, losing a couple of more players, and just in general getting dominated by the Seahawks. It was really a one-sided game. That's what happens when you try to get too cute and wear the all-black jerseys. I feel like teams that wear black jerseys when black isn't in their primary color scheme, they're just cursing themselves. I just feel like when teams do that, most of the time, some bad shit happens, and in this case for the 49ers, they lost a couple of kinda big players, and they lost the game. A very big game that would have granted them the 1 seed, and here they are, now they gotta play in the first round against the Eagles. But San Francisco wasn't the only team that looked like shit last week. The Eagles lost to the Redskins. Enough said. So yeah, both teams are pulling up to Philadelphia, coming off of very icky games. But one big concern for the 49ers is their piss-poor turnover differential. It's the lowest among all the remaining playoff teams at -6, while the Eagles are at a +6. The Niners offense was red hot up until last week. Obviously, they got hit with a fucking icy bucket of cold water. But at the very least, their defense kind of stepped up, except for on 3rd and long. Despite the underwhelming performance last week, the 49ers still have a top 3 passing offense among the remaining teams. And really the rest of the major statistics for both teams are pretty middle ground, nothing impressive or too horrible by either side. But just going off of recent performance, the Eagles look much worse than the 49ers. The Eagles have looked less than pleasant for the past couple of months. If the Eagles want to beat the 49ers, then they must rely heavily on their defense, because if they don't make a few stops, then and it's going to be pretty hard to keep up because that offense is not doing very much good for them at all. But even that will be pretty difficult to manage with the potential absence of Jalen Carter. He is questionable to play at the time of recording. But maybe they won't need him if the 49ers' questionable offensive players don't end up playing. George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, Trent Williams, and also D. Winters on that defense. You know, the 49ers have lost enough linebackers. They don't need to be losing more. They better hope D. Winters plays. And a couple of fun facts, the Eagles have not lost a playoff game at home since 2019, and just in general, they've been pretty good at the link. But the 49ers have not lost in the wildcard game since 2002, only having done so twice in their history. But unfortunately, one of these impressive streaks is going to come to an end on Sunday. And I think the team that will keep their streak alive is the 49ers. Despite their shit performance last week and, you know, the amount of injuries they're going through, I still think they'll pull this one out in Lincoln Financial Field. That's how little confidence I have in the Eagles. That is how poorly they've played these last couple months. I can't trust their offense. I cannot. And their defense is fine, but I don't know if it'll be fine enough. So I see either team winning, don't get me wrong, but I see the 49ers winning more times than not. On Sunday night, the LA Justin Herbert will be playing the New England Patriots in Foxborough. I've said the LA Justin Herbert quite a few times, but I emphasize it the most now. Have you seen that game against the Broncos when Justin Herbert is not under center or in shotgun? The Chargers simply just are not a playoff team without Herbert. They are not in any universe. I mean it when I say the LA Justin Herbert, because without him, the Chargers are the worst team in the playoffs this year. And again, I don't even think they would be a playoff team without him. Looking at the stats, the Chargers are literally the most middle ground offense in the NFL. I will give the Chargers that their defense is very promising. They're top 10 in total passing and rushing defense as a whole. So this is definitely a defense that can give New England some problems. It literally just comes down to their offense because they're taking on a Patriots offense that is high-flying and very consistent, who just got done smashing the Miami Dolphins. And I really feel like the Chargers are a fine first opponent for the Patriots this postseason because we got to be honest, as good as the Patriots have looked all year, they've been beating on mostly not very good teams. So LA will definitely be a good test for this team to, you know, beat like an actually solid opponent, or I can't call the Chargers solid, but, you know, above mediocre, if you will. Like I said, New England has an elite offense, but they also got an elite defense that is top 5 in rushing, passing, and overall stoppage. The absence of Mac Hollins, as well as a few questionable players on that defense, is going to sting for the Patriots, I imagine, but even if some of those players don't play, I got the Patriots beating the Chargers here, no problem. And I mostly believe so because, again, the Patriots are the most consistent team in the NFL right now, going against a team that hasn't even unlocked consistency in their skill tree. So I'll be baffled if the Patriots somehow don't pull this one out. And finally, on what I believe is the last Monday Night Football game, the Houston Texans will be playing the Steelers in Pittsburgh. The Steelers just punched their ticket to the playoffs once again after a clutch and, quite honestly, lucky victory against the Baltimore Ravens. The Texans also came away with a win, scoring big, but that number one defense showed a bit of weakness as they allowed over 350 total yards to a very battered Colts offense, as well as 30 points to that same offense. And yes, despite all the injuries they're suffering, the Texans do have the number one overall defense in the NFL with the second highest turnover differential in the league. All that to back up a mediocre offense, which can look good at times like it did last week, but for the most part, it's not exactly their sexiest attribute. And I would say the same thing for Pittsburgh. Great defense backing up a mediocre offense. But neither side of Pittsburgh is good or even mediocre. They're just bad. People assume the Steelers have a good defense, but that's just because they have a really solid turnover differential. They know how to take the ball away. But other than that, they get thrashed all the time. And of course, their offense isn't anything special. The Steelers are just simply the worst team in the AFC. Like, I don't think they belong here. And I saw this shit coming from the very beginning of the season. Before I even, saw their preseason performance, I could tell by all these trades they were making, all these big moves, they were trying too hard for no reason. There was going to be no difference, no type of change in their system. It's just going to wind up the same results as, whatever they get every single year. On top of all of that, the Steelers have a pretty consistent recent history of losing in the first round of the playoffs. This, quite honestly, should be smooth sailing for the Texans. This is about as easy of a playoff win as it gets. So yeah, I got Houston winning and moving on. Now, as good as I feel about a lot of these predictions and these teams that I selected to win, if there's one thing this season has taught me, it's that nothing is automatic in football. Never count out anything in the NFL.